With the human civilization established and thriving, we turn our attention back to a familiar sight, a dark vault where a sleeping race, ready to change the world, is about to wake up. Let us revisit the ancient tomb-like structure of Uldaman. As mentioned before in previous episodes, this video and the ones preceding it are an abridgment of the World of Warcraft Chronicle series, which means that this is a condensed version of the lore in the Warcraft universe from something that's already been condensed itself, which means we will not be talking about every small detail pertaining to every event in the Warcraft universe. And if this is your first time here, I suggest starting from the very beginning. I'll leave a link to the playlist in the description down below. But if you're all caught up, then let's continue our journey. Far to the south of Dalaran lies the ancient vault of Uldaman. Deep inside, Ironaya and Keeper Archaedas resided in hibernation. After being afflicted by the curse of flesh, many of the mechanomes had departed from the site, leaving the area dark and silent, except for a few remaining clockwork servants who had retained their original form. But over time, they gradually degraded and broke down until only one was left alive. This lone mechanome did what she could to maintain Uldaman as the stronghold fell into disrepair. After a while, the Curse of Flesh won the battle and changed her into a gnome. As age took over and led her by the hand closer to death, she realized that time was running short. In her final moments, knowing that the sleeping Earthen would be abandoned and forgotten if not woken up, she activated the Earthen's hibernation chambers, stirring them to life, waking the sleeping Titan Forge to a new world and a new destiny. Once cognitive of their surroundings, the Earthen discovered that they had changed dramatically. Even while asleep, the Curse of Flesh had changed them into creatures of flesh and blood, thus referring to themselves from then on as Dwarves. Groggy from their long sleep, they left the halls of Uldaman and faced the surface of the world. And like the gnomes in the past, they went west towards the majestic mountains. There, they contended with the savage beasts of the land. Whereas the gnomes used their ingenuity to stay alive, the dwarves relied on their resilience and natural physical strength. In time, they settled in the snowy region of Dunmorrow. The Curse of Flesh had diminished the dwarves' memory, but they still held faint ties to their Titan Forge heritage. Because of this, they were inspired to name their home Khaz Modan, or Mountain of Khaz, honoring the Titan Khaz-Gorath. Retaining their affinity to stoneworking and mining, the dwarves began digging into the mountain and crafted a forge. Around it, the grand city of Ironforge was built, and became their home for the mighty nation that would thrive deep under the mountain. Not only did they mine the mountain in which they lived, but the surrounding terrain was explored as well. This was how they discovered the existence of the gnomes dwelling in the nearby caverns. Enthralled by their ingenuity, the dwarves also sensed a natural kinship with the gnomes, no doubt due to their shared Titan-forged ancestry. The dwarves then imparted their knowledge of stonework and construction to their newfound neighbors, allowing the gnomes to lay the foundations for the city that would be called Gnomeregan. In return, they taught the dwarves engineering and science, which led to improvements within their own city. Although each race kept to themselves in the centuries that followed, they had formed an unbreakable bond, aiding each other in times of need. In the southern reaches of the Eastern Kingdoms, another troll tribe struggled with poverty and hardship. The Gurubashi never fully recovered from the events of the Sundering. Hunting and farming grounds were lost forever. Famine was a constant companion for the Empire. Looking to regain their former glory, the Gurubashi of Stranglethorn Vale looked to the Loa spirits for assistance. One would answer their cries: Hakar the Soul Flayer, the Loa of Blood. In exchange for aiding the trolls with extending their empire across the lower half of the continent, Hakar demanded a large number of living sacrifices. The Gurubashi, who pledged their loyalties to the demonic spirit, became known as the Hakari, and were known for slaughtering gnolls, murlocs, and other trolls who opposed Hakar. Prisoners wished that they had died in battle, because it was Hakar's disembodied spirit that fed on the blood of the captives for years. Despite the horrific and barbaric acts, the Gurubashi had achieved all they had hoped for. Under Hakar's control, they conquered vast swaths of land and even islands along the southern coastline. At first, the Zandalari, observing from afar, were pleased with the Gurubashi's progress. But once it became clear that Hakar's bloodlust would never be sated, they knew that the Dark Loa would drive not only the troll race to destruction, but the entire world. The Zandalari rallied their forces and immediately set sail for the Eastern Kingdoms. Upon arriving, they met with Gurubashi trolls that kept their discontent hidden from the Hakari. The Zandalari and their new allies learned that a faction of Hakar's most zealous priests, the Atalai, were trying to summon the Loa's spirit into a living form. This would only awaken terrible new dimensions of his power and spell certain doom for the troll race. The Zandalari then stormed the Gurubashi capital of Zul'Gurub and battled to the top of the Hakar blood-stained shrine, eventually defeating Hakar and most of his crazed followers. Although they had claimed a defeat, the Zandalari and their allies agreed to keep an eye out for any sign of resurgence of the Loa. Hakar wasn't truly dead. His spirit had merely been banished from the physical world. As for the Atalai priests, some had escaped into the jungle surrounding Zul'Gurub. They would settle in the Swamp of Sorrows, north of the Gurubashi capital. There, they would secretly construct the Temple of Altal Hakar. Inside, the deranged priests would continue their worship of Hakar, hoping to once again summon the Loa into the physical world. These rituals of dark magic twisted the surrounding flora and fauna, drawing the attention of the green dragon aspect, Ysera. Once she learned about their plans to summon him again, Ysera unleashed her powers on the temple and those living within. This attack buckled the temple's walls, blasting its foundations apart. The structure began to sink beneath the land. Knowing that the priests would try to summon the Loa again, Ysera commanded several of her loyal green dragons to watch over the ruined temple, ensuring that it would never again be used to bring such evil into the world. Now, at this point, it's safe to say that we've heard enough about the Highborn. Well, not quite. Across the sea, a secret society of Highborn known as the Shendralar, meaning those who remain hidden, survived the Sundering. What were they up to? Well, before the continent of Kalimdor split apart, Queen Ashara had charged them with the storage and safekeeping of her most precious tomes. Led by Prince Tortheldrin, they obeyed her and traveled to the southern jungles of Kalimdor, establishing the city of Eldre'Thalas. When the Sundering occurred, the city narrowly escaped destruction. This was because Tortheldrin and his followers weaved a spell to protect the area. Even though the city was saved, upon learning that the Well of Eternity was destroyed, they began to see their immortality diminish, causing them to fall into a deep lethargy, isolating themselves within the sanctuary. In time, the prince would formulate a plan to revitalize the Shendralar. Pylons were constructed in one of the damaged wings of Eldre'Thalas and would be used to house a new source of power, a demon named Immol'thar. Tortheldrin had secretly summoned and bound the creature in order to siphon its powers, thus allowing his followers to feed off of an energy source. much like the Night Elves were doing with the New Well of Eternity in Hyjal, and the High Elves with the Sunwell in Quel'Thalas. Now, objections from the Highborn were clearly out in the open. This is until they experienced the demon's energy for themselves. Invigorating, addicting, more than what the Well of Eternity had ever been, regardless that it was dark and volatile. Even though the Chendralar basked in this new power, they knew that keeping the demon in their midst was dangerous. So, they used their new power to develop a means of imprisoning him. And for a long time, we're talking thousands of years, all was well. But over time, the cost of power increased to keep Immol'thar contained, so much that the Chendralar had none to siphon for themselves. Nearly in a single moment, Tortheldrin's plan had failed, and he lost access to the demon's magic. Once again, immortality was but a distant memory. And in place of that, the Chendralar had become hopelessly addicted to Immol'thar's energy. This is when things turned dark. Tortheldrin, desperate to regain his power, murdered the Chendralar that were not particularly close to him. Having thinned the numbers, the rest of the Chendralar could draw on Immol'thar's power indefinitely. In time, the prince and remaining followers abandoned much of their once glorious city. The greater part of Eldre'Thalas fell into darkness and disrepair, allowing surrounding creatures from the jungle to move in and claim a new home. As the Chendralar retreated deeper into Eldre'Thalas, the kingdom of Arathor began to split apart. The small outposts established outside of Strom became their own cities, no longer relying on the capital city for anything. Kul Tiras continued trading and shipping. They also had built up a massive navy. So large was their shipping and fishing economy that it eclipsed the maritime power of Gilneas. Unable to compete with Kul Tiras and their navy, Gilneas began to focus on bolstering their land-based armies and trade, which led them to becoming one of the most powerful fighting forces in Arathor, equaled only by the capital state of Alterac. Gilneas and Alterac often combined their forces and led grand expeditions to secure the borders of the nation. When they traveled to Cosmodon, they discovered the dwarves and gnomes. Marveled by their technology, the humans became friends with the two newly found races. Trade, exchanging knowledge, and even teaching magic quickly followed. Back in Strom, power and authority was diminishing. The surroundings of the city left much to be desired regarding natural resources. Sure, there were plenty of rocks and mountainous terrain, but that was just about it. Over time, the noble families of the city left for the north, in hopes of benefiting from the fertile valleys and pastures. There, they founded a city-state and named it after the surrounding region, Lordaeron. The nobles also used their wealth to buy up large plots of land, such as the Agamand Mills, as well as the farmsteads owned by the Balnir and Saladin families. Lordaeron was also home to solitary religious individuals who believed in the light, a power that they claimed infused every living thing in existence. Here's a little more on that. After the Troll Wars, a number of human priests began to have faint visions and dreams of angelic beings. What they didn't know was that they were communing with a Naru in the Great Dark Beyond. Through this connection, they were guided and introduced to the Holy Light. This led them to learning and harnessing the magical healing effects that the light provided. They also established a religious movement based on justice, peace, and altruistic works. Many of the common folk flocked to what the priests had established. Even the sick and elderly traveled to religious communes in Lordaeron, hoping to find a cure for the ailments. The city's borders quickly expanded, maturing into a popular kingdom. Eventually, Lordaeron would be named the capital city of the new nation. Strom, now having been abandoned by the noble lords, was near its end. The last living descendants of King Thoradin left the once great city. Led by a member of Thoradin's line, named Faldir, they set sail and ventured to the far south, hoping that the rumors of a lush, unplumbed land were true. And they were. Thoradin's descendants settled in the land and founded the kingdom of Stormwind. Nestled among cliffs and boasting a natural protected harbor, this city-state established itself as a major power in the region. So, what became of Strom? It was left in the hands of a few ruling families who were a bit too stubborn to abandon the old capital. Among them were even descendants of General Igneous Trollbane, who, if you remember from the previous video, was a leader in the Troll Wars with General Lordain. Over the years, these families rebuilt Strom's crumbling infrastructure and renamed their capital Stromgarde. The city, however, would never regain its former glory. Thoradin's dream of a unified people was dying. Over time, the various city-states became increasingly distant from one another. Rivalries sparked as these nations became more concerned with their own well-being and less inclined to offer aid to each other. Let's jump over to a race that we haven't talked about in a good while. For thousands of years, the nomadic Tauren wandered Kalimdor's lush forests. Of all the lands that they roamed, one in particular became very sacred to them. It was called Moshanshi, or the Loom of the Earth Mother. Named after the deity who they believed created the world, this area was settled between the jungles of Feralis and the Stone Talon Mountains. The interesting thing about this area was that it gave off faint elemental whisperings, enough to the point that Tauren shamans were convinced that the Earth Mother actually lived there beneath the meadows. So convinced were the shaman that they spent decades trying to wake her through celebratory rituals. The thing is, they succeeded. But the whisperings they were hearing weren't from the Earth Mother. Rather, they were from something much darker. And they would soon realize this in a tangible form. Below the grasslands, from a cavern deep within the earth, Princess Theradras, a descendant of the elemental ruler Therazane, emerged. Looking back on a previous episode, it was mentioned that the Keepers had imprisoned most of the elementals in another plane of existence, except for Theradras, who eluded banishment, hiding away beneath the earth and falling into a deep slumber, weakening her mighty form over this period of hibernation. This newly awakened Theradras reached out to the surrounding vegetation, consuming all of its energy. This empowered Theradras and regenerated her craggy form. But the transfer of power came at a cost. As Theradras siphoned the energy of the lush plant life, the land became desiccated. Plant life across Moshanshi withered and died. The horrified Tauren, now forced to scavenge for sustenance, would later rename the barren plains Desolus. This event sent ripples throughout Azeroth and beyond. Even the Emerald Dream felt its loss of life. It was so impactful that one of Cenarius' sons, Zaitar, emerged from the dream to investigate. Much like his father, Zaitar walked the physical world in the form of a majestic half-stag. His investigation led him into the deep caverns below Desolus, where he would find Theradras. His intentions were to imprison the strange creature, but surprisingly, he grew enchanted with the princess. It was the life energies that radiated from her that enticed him. They found each other to be beautiful. Theradras knew of the influence she had over Zaitar and took advantage of it. The princess claimed that she meant no harm to the land and was seeking for a way to restore the region to its former beauty. Together, she urged, perhaps they could succeed. This is when Zaitar abandoned his earlier quest and became Theradras' mate. He knew it was against nature, but he couldn't help it. The two of them would give life to a new race called the Centaur, and their barbarism would come to terrorize the lands of Kalimdor. What the Centaur lacked in elegance and grace, they made up for in strength. They were fast and powerful creatures. But it was upon seeing his offspring that Zaitar recognized the depths of his sin. Even though he tried to connect with his children, he could not bear their presence. The Centaur recognized the loathing in their father's eyes, and it drove them into a blind rage, resulting in them striking Zaitar down. His death shatter Theragus' heart. And the elemental princess chastised the Centaur for the murder of their father. Realizing that they had hurt their mother, the Centaur begged for forgiveness, promising to honor and revere Zhaitar from that day forward. Theragus later entombed his spirit in the great cavern where she had once slumbered. The Centaur would name this site Maraudon, treating it as a holy ground from then on. As for the Centaur, they would fan out across Desolus, unleashing their wrath upon the Tauren that inhabited the area, forcing them to abandon their homes. But that didn't stop the Centaur from their barbaric pursuit. They would hunt down the Tauren wherever they went, igniting a long and dark period of war between the two races. Since the last war against the Troll Empire, and I mean, we're talking about before the Sundering, descendants of the Akir had stayed hidden in their subterranean domains. The Mantid were the only ones that remained as an active threat. Nearly all of Azeroth's races had forgotten the ruthless potential of the insectoid race. One of the colonies, the Kiraji, had taken root in the ancient fortress of Ahn'Qiraj. Originally built to contain the old god Cthulhu, the insectoids had laid dormant within. During the time of Queen Ashara, the Night Elf Empire had once known about the fortress, but over time, its existence became lost to memory. Few living creatures dwelled near Ahn'Qiraj, mainly due to its location in Silithus, which we all know to be a brutal desert. The mighty fortress wasn't rediscovered by the elves until Archdruid Fandral Staghelm started a quest to regrow the land of Silithus. He sent his son Valstan and a group of trusted druids to accomplish this task. While looking for any hidden water reservoirs in the area, they stumbled across Ahn'Qiraj. While the druids were cautious about walking in, Valstan didn't seem to mind and went on his own little adventure. His choice to do so would have serious negative consequences. The presence that he set within the dark, cold halls inadvertently roused the dormant Kiraji back to life. Deep below, Cthulhu also became aware of the awakened Kiraji. Seeing this as some sort of opportunity, the old god drove the insectoids into a murderous frenzy. Many of the lesser minions, known as Silithid, were organized by the Kiraji overlords and used to do their bidding. Valstan was shocked and retreated from the forgotten structure. He and the druids established a small outpost in Silithus to watch over the now awakened insectoids, only to watch Ahn'Qiraj swell with more Kiraji than they could count. Valstan then called on his father for help, and Fandral responded, bringing druids, sentinels, priestesses, and keepers of the grove to deal with the Kiraji threat. For many months, they battled with their new foe. The War of the Shifting Sands had begun. After building multiple outposts to help organize the war, the druids and their allies eventually pushed back the Kiraji into the heart of Silithus itself. And just as victory seemed secured, the Kiraji orchestrated a diversion, capturing Valstan and physically ripping him apart in front of his father. His death shattered Fandral. Sowing uncertainty throughout the Night Elf ranks, this became the opportunity that the Kiraji were looking for. They fanned out again into the desert and pushed east towards Tanaris. In their drive to attack anything in front of them, they assaulted the sanctum of the Bronze Dragonflight, the Caverns of Time. Led by Anachronos, the Bronze Flight enlisted the red, green, and blue flights to help the elves drive back the Kiraji armies behind the walls of Ahn'Qiraj from whence they came. But even with their help, there were too many of them. Thousands of elves had perished in this war, and it seemed that it would never end. Instead of eradicating the insectoids from the land, Fandral and the dragons came up with a plan: lock the Kiraji inside of Ahn'Qiraj itself. Meeting in front of the fortress, Fandral and his druids focused their powers as one. Along with Anachronos, the elves summoned a great barricade to close off Ahn'Qiraj. Outside of the cursed city, the dry earth split wide, and a magical barrier of stone and roots emerged. This impenetrable scarab wall towered high over the barren landscape, thus sealing the Karaji within the city forever. As a final act, Anachronos created two artifacts, the Scarab Gong and the Scepter of the Shifting Sands. The scepter was entrusted to Fandral, and should the need ever arise to enter the city, he could use it to open the wall. Fandral didn't find any solace with ending the Karaji threat. His son's death tormented his heart, and in his rage, he shattered the Scepter of the Shifting Sands. The pieces of the artifact became lost for the next 1,000 years. Back in Dalaran, as the years passed, new guardians of Tirisfal came and went. Some retired in peace, while others died in battle against the silent war with the Burning Legion's agents. But the main point was, people were safe. One of the last guardians to serve was Skavel. When his time came to transfer his power to a new protector, he found that there was no suitable candidate to take his place. So, the council asked him to stay on until that person could be found. He agreed, not happy about it, but he did it. Years later, Skavel found a group of apprentices who might succeed him. Among them was a human woman named Aegwynn. Proving to be the most skillful out of all of them, she, with Skavel's blessing, was bestowed the honor of guardianship. She was brilliant, but also stubborn and bullheaded in her relations with the Council of Tirisfal. Aegwynn didn't trust authority figures, thus leading her to ignore recommendations and advice from the Elder Magi. She forged her own path as the Guardian, and while the Council didn't like her choices, personality, pretty much everything about her, they couldn't deny the fact that she was powerful and a prodigy capable of wielding massive amounts of arcane energy. Her effectiveness as the Guardian outweighed her acts of disobedience. When it came time for her to end the 100 years of service, Aegwynn sensed something dark stirring in the lands of Northrend. Upon arriving there, she found a pack of demons hunting blue dragons. Unable to combat the Legion's power, the demons fed on their arcane energies. Aegwynn quickly traveled to the Wormrest Temple and called on the dragonflights to uphold their sacred pact to protect the world from any form of evil. Led by Alexstrasza, several of the dragonflights agreed to fight at the Guardian's side. Together, they staged an ambush near the gigantic skeletal remains of Galakrond. The trap worked. Demons of the Legion were overwhelmed by the attack, but Aegwynn and the dragons didn't expect what came next. As the skies darkened, a monstrous demonic form emerged on the battlefield. Sargeras, the ruler of the Burning Legion and last remaining of the Titans, had arrived. But how is this possible? Well, this was only an avatar of the Demon Lord, a small portion of Sargeras' vast cosmic power, but large enough to be a threat to the Guardian standing in front of him. As the Demon Lord attacked, Aegwynn did not hesitate to fight back. The battle that followed was the most difficult that she had ever fought. So powerful were the spells that were cast that they scarred the ice crust of Northrend. Magic was so powerfully present that it engulfed the region and held the mighty dragons at bay. In the end, Aegwynn defeated her foe. She had won. Or had she? Upon being struck down, Sargeras, unknowingly to the Guardian, transferred his spirit into her body, lurking in the depths of her soul. She then took Sargeras' colossal, broken form and sealed it away in the ancient Night Elf city of Suramar, some of which had been blasted to the bottom of the sea during the Sundering. Now, I'm sure that a lot of you are looking for some specifics about how this all went down. So, in order to explain this, I need to talk a bit more about what happened in the past during the War of the Ancients. We know that in that time, the Legion had attempted to open a gateway within Suramar itself. That plan was foiled by a sect of Highborn led by Grand Magistrix Elisand. She and her sorcerers created a series of enchanted seals to close the portal and also negate nearby fell energies. When the Sundering occurred, the part of Suramar containing the Legion's failed gateway was sucked beneath the waves. These lost ruins grabbed Aegwynn's attention. The Highborn's seals would nullify whatever evil still lingered in Sargeras' avatar. So, she buried the Demon Lord's broken body within the sunken portion of Suramar, hoping that his remains would lie undisturbed there until the end of time. While Aegwynn was watching over Azeroth as the Guardian, the Pandaren people remained isolated on their homeland. Things were peaceful there, except for the Mantid's periodic assaults against the Serpent's Spine. Content with living in the mist that kept them hidden, they all believed that the rest of Azeroth had been annihilated in the Sundering, except for one Pandaren named Liu Lang. Having been raised on a ranch in the Valley of the Four Winds, he often wandered the cliffs that overlooked the sea. Liu wondered what existed beyond the horizon. Led by his curiosity, he decided to embark on a great sea voyage, in hopes of discovering what had become of the outside world. He gathered a few supplies, hopped on top of a small turtle named Shenzin Su, and set sail through the mist. Time passed, and the other Pandaren thought that he must have died. Then, 5 years later, Liu Lang returned with stories of mysterious lands and people on the other side of the sea, only to resupply and head out again. But this time, not alone. The turtle, Shenzin Su, had grown larger over the years, allowing more space for people to ride. Liu Lang's stories inspired another Pandaren by the name of Shinizi to tag along. They would later become husband and wife. Every 5 years, they would return to Pandaria. Each time, Shenzin Su had become larger, which led to more Pandarens joining the journey across the sea. This tradition continued until the great turtle had grown to the size of a giant island. Misty mountains and lakes formed on top of the turtle's shell. In time, villages would spring up across the landscape. Those that lived on the back of the gigantic reptile named the land the Wandering Isle. On his final voyage from Pandaria, Liu Lang fell into a deep sleep from which he never woke. His spirit merged with the sea turtle upon his death. And in honor of his legacy, the traditions of exploration would carry on with the Pandarens living on the Wandering Isle for many centuries that followed. Over the years, after the battle with Sargeras and Northrend, Aegwynn's thoughts became twisted due to the influence of the fallen Titan that now dwelled secretly in her soul. The Guardian isolated herself from the Council of Tirisfal, but this didn't mean that she didn't keep a watchful eye on their activities. And this is when Aegwynn noticed that the Council was interfering with the politics of the human nations, claiming that they were doing what was necessary to prevent war and suffering in the mortal world. But the Guardian viewed the Council's shadowy activities with skepticism and unease. Here's what she was worried about. If she stepped down from her position, then Aegwynn believed that the Council would choose a weaker Guardian to take her place, someone they could use to push their political agenda. And this is why she stayed on as Guardian past her 100-year commitment, using her power to extend her life longer than what would have naturally been possible. Even though some of the Council disagreed with her choice, they accepted it because she had done such a good job in her position. Over the next 100 years, Aegwynn's relationship with the Council became more and more strained. Sargeras was still working on her throughout this time, making the Guardian paranoid about her fellow Magi. This led her to seclude herself even more by building a tower in the remote area of Deadwind Pass. We know this building as Karazhan. And the location of this tower would remain a secret from the Council for many years. Aegwynn would retreat to Karazhan in order to work in peace and quiet from time to time. It also served as a conduit for the potent ley lines in the surrounding region, allowing her to siphon power when she needed it. Over time, older members of the Council passed away. Political influence was still being pushed on the human nations, and many of the new members of the Council pushed for the Guardian to relinquish her powers. During a rare visit to Dalaran, Aegwynn was ordered to step down as Guardian or face immediate consequences. This turned her distrust of the Council into outright hostility. She told them that putting the fate of Azeroth in their hands was tantamount to dooming the world. After this meeting was over, and with little to no other options left, the Council began talking about a plan to force Aegwynn to comply. The talk of making a new Guardian was on the table, but that idea was quickly put down due to the fact that if two Guardians fought, it would become something disastrous to the world. Think big cataclysmic spells. This led them to agree on a more subtle course of action. They formed the Tiras Guard, an order of mages that used relics and armaments that could diminish the Guardian's powers. After years of training, they set out to hunt down Aegwynn and return her to Dalaran. While she did elude them with ease, the Tiras Guard eventually found the Tower of Karazhan and reported back to the Council. With Karazhan no longer safe, Aegwynn sealed off the tower from outsiders, then set out to find a new refuge, one that the Council and the Tiras Guard would never find. She decided to build this new stronghold in the ruins of ancient Suramar, attached to the tomb of Sargeras, which was previously known as the Temple of Elune. Deep beneath the sea, her dwellings, the Guardian Sanctum, would stay hidden from the Tiras Guard for centuries.
Thank you so much for watching this video. If you like this kind of content, make sure to like and subscribe. And if you'd like to support the work that I'm doing, please check out my YouTube, Patreon, or Twitch memberships. And a big shout out to all the names on the screen here. You mean so much to me. Thank you so much for your help. And with that, I'll see you guys next time on the Tales of Azeroth.